This is the story of how Reggie convinced me and millions of other 3DS owners that it was a cool thing for Nintendo to steal our money.
What?
My name is Upa, and this is a YouTube video starring Reggie, Iwata, the Nintendo 3DS, and the $80 I'll never get back. To understand the dark nature of the crime, we need to analyze the context of the 3DS's launch. If you were a fellow Nintendo fanboy back in 2011, chances were pretty high that you, similarly to me, bought a unit at launch. In fact, the 3DS sold more than 3.6 million copies in the first month, which was the best early performance of any new system released back then.
3DS! 3DS!
It was even more impressive considering that it wasn't released during the holiday season. However, for those of us who bought it at launch, it was a bold move. At this time, there was only 3 first-party games available to play, and about another 15 games from other developers. And if you didn't like any of these games, there was only so much you could do with the 3DS. One thing you could do was to play with the AR cards that came with the console, giving you the high-quality experience that major companies are trying to hype us up for now, 12 years later. Apple's Vision Pro? More like Apple Vision no, thank you, I have a 3DS. You could also spend time shooting at people's flying faces or forcing bypassers to fight against kidnappers. For those who didn't appreciate paper, flying faces, kidnappers, or the fact that the coolest game out there was Super Street Fighter 4, there wasn't really a reason to buy the 3DS. Which turned out to be the case for a lot of people, since the sales of the 3DS dropped massively after the first week. The lack of good games was definitely a reason why people didn't buy the console. You don't buy a console to play console, you buy it to play games. You know what I'm talking about, right, Mr. Wii U? However, there was another reason for why the sales stopped. The price of the new console was expensive. Comparing it to its predecessor, which happened to be the second best-selling console of all time, the 3DS was $100 more expensive at launch than its older sibling. I think it's safe to say that Nintendo took the 3DS, tied both its arms and legs behind its back, and then expected it to fly bravely into the sunset, returning with all their investments. So what was really going on inside Nintendo? Back in 2010, a year before the release of the 3DS, Nintendo showcased their upcoming console at E3. The reception was strong, and the surprise factor of the 3D left a big impression. What Nintendo wasn't so transparent with at this time, though, was the lineup of games they had prepared within the first year of the release. They had Tutored of Time,
3D.
Space Fairies,
3D.
Italian Cards,
In 3D.
and Sakurai's Angel Simulator,
Also in 3D.
coming to the console. It wasn't surprising that Nintendo possibly felt a bit cocky considering the circumstances. Someone who didn't feel as cocky though was Reggie at the American branch. Reggie explains the situation from his point of view in his Autobiography, Disrupting the Game from the Bronx to the Top of Nintendo, published in 2022. According to Reggie, the pricing of the console was a delicate matter. Reggie writes about Iwata and himself having several meetings discussing the price of the 3DS in the Western market. Reggie wanted to be aggressive, setting a launch price of $199, going for the same price as the 5-year-old Wii. Iwata, however, had to take the manufacturing costs into consideration, giving him little to no wiggle room. He asked Reggie to settle for $219 minimum. This was a problematic price, according to Reggie. At this time, retailers in the US always went for a price ending with either $49 or $99 if the product was to be sold for over $100. This meant that if Nintendo went with a price of $219, then retailers would just raise it to $249, giving them better margins and therefore making Nintendo lose money, and customers would be left with an even more expensive console. Reggie explained to Iwata that they had 2 options. Number 1 was to release the 3DS at the price of $199, which Reggie highly advocated. And number 2 was to release it for the price of $249, making it $50 more expensive than the already too expensive Wii. To Reggie's disappointment, Nintendo went with option 2. So now we know that the launch of the 3DS was mediocre, and the price was surprisingly high. But how did Nintendo actually steal our money? When Iwata and his nakama noticed the huge drop in sales after the first week of the 3DS's launch, they panicked. Reggie-san!
Of course,
said Reggie. Nintendo had so much good software coming up just a couple of months later, so they would be fine as long as they made the 3DS cheaper before the fall of the same year. However, Iwata was now concerned that if they lowered the price just 5 months after the console was released, wouldn't the die-hard fans who bought the system at launch feel cheated? Imagine being 15 years old and you love Nintendo. You have no money, and your friends tease you for spending time catching lame-ass anime flip-flops instead of shooting random strangers online. You know, like a cool teenager would do. Still, you spend all your savings on the 3DS because it's Papa Nintendo. You're then left with no games to play, but it's raining cats and dogs and muscle men hitting each other in 3D, only to see Nintendo cutting the price of the console right before all the really cool stuff that you've been waiting for comes out.
Emotional, damn it!
After discussing the matter, Iwata and Reggie decided on lowering the price of $249 down to $169. Enter. My long-lost $80. But how did they save all their die-hard fans from the painful suffering of living a life where they could never learn to love and trust another money-driven company again? Reggie used the word that couldn't be used. The forbidden sentence. Nintendo's biggest nightmare. He said, free games. Iwata, accepting his defeat, succumbed to Reggie's disrespect for money and kneeled before his almighty body, which in fact was ready. They created the Ambassador program. If you registered your purchase of the 3DS before the 12th of August 2011, you would receive 10 NES games and 10 GBA games, making it 20 free games in total. If we look at the list of all the games, there's actually a lot of them which stands out. And if you were to buy one of these titles today, most of the NES ones would go for at least $20, and the GBA ones for around $40. Still, for some people, these games were old news. A lot of people had already played them, and if you want to be real picky, the best move for fans would probably have been to give away the best-selling games for the NES and the GBA. But I guess that's probably because of licensing issues. But it didn't stop with the free games. If you were part of the Ambassador program, you could also download an in-game app which functioned as a certificate to show that you were a true die-hard fan. Honestly, considering how naive I personally was back in 2011, I'd accept the certificate alone to be enough compensation. Fortunately, I have higher standards today. With that being said, please subscribe to my channel, I'll do anything you ask for, please. Now, if you were one of the few people who were a part of the Ambassador program and still felt cheated after the forced compensation, let's take a look at how much your 3DS is worth today. Now that is a lot of money. Personally, my favorite out of the free games lineup was both of the Metroid games. The Ambassador program was actually how I was introduced to the series. It had such a great impact on me that I created a video about it. And thanks to the Switch, you can now play all the main games of the series on one console. Even the first one of the Prime trilogy. Anyways, sorry for rambling on about Metroid. Okay, thank you, bye.